And so I would generate a one-page narrative report. With computers today, it'd be simple because it's templated and you fill in the blanks. Because, you know, your narrative reports take a certain form, but the details vary. So what I did was, we didn't have HIPAA back then. I didn't know how to spell HIPAA, but you just make sure now that the patient signed a HIPAA form. And I started to send out the narrative report to the medical doctors, a one-page narrative, and I asked permission of the patient just because I wanted the medical doctors to know what was going on with their patient as well as my own patient. And I was reporting in a way that, you know, as chiropractors, I think some of us see some reports or write reports where it's our own unique style of writing and descriptives and so on. But I was writing in terms that the medical community understood because it was the only way I knew how to communicate in a narrative report. And what I've done is I've given you a sample. I don't need to go over it, but there's one key point in the report I want to emphasize. But why this was an advantage to me and why it resulted in a lot of referrals is because the medical community, we were like an unknown to them. They had their impressions of who we are and what we did. But more importantly, when I started to send them reports that looked like their kind of reporting, languaging that they could understand, they didn't know who I was, but I was just a chiropractor that wrote narrative reports. They appreciated it, and how I knew that was, it gave me opportunities to communicate with them on their patients. And then if I saw something unique or picked up something and I gave them a call and communicated, they would be agreeable to communicate with me because it was a narrative report that linked the link. What was also unique is they would think maybe we were so bizarre, I don't know. Now, mind you, that was years ago, but there's still a little strangeness in the air sometimes, I would imagine, when they're thinking about who we are and what we do. I was communicating in a language that they understood. It was like, you know, if you're at a bank and you're saying 5 times 5 is 30, no one understands what you're talking about. But if you happen to say it's 25, you're speaking a similar language. What was unique about this in my reports, not that I made the stuff up, it was the way I communicated, is I always looked at patients with having an episode. And if you listen to that webinar I did the other night on outcome assessment tools and documentation, I'm looking at episodic care. They start and they finish, and then if they have a flare, we'll start and finish again. But what was unique in the reporting was I communicated with terms of neurologic and orthopedic assessments and used outcome assessment tools. I used diagnoses of mechanical dysfunctions, but in the plan, I talked about short courses of care, tri-weekly, bi-weekly, once weekly, tapering to discharge. That was unique because their impression was we always continue to treat indefinitely in ongoing fashion, and here they found somebody that not only communicated in a language they understood, but somebody that actually treated and discharged the patient for that episode of care. And I also talked about an active approach the patient needs to take to help them be in greater control of their ongoing problems. So it's just not total dependency on passive treatment. So these key things that I continued to send out and then follow up 2 weeks or a month later was just a simple way, and there are 2 reports. One's far more lengthy, but the first one is just a one-pager. I wanted to make it simple on myself, but it was very simple to put this together. I would fax them over or mail them out. There was no such thing as email. And they used these reports, and I used it as a way to introduce myself to them and them to me. And then the bottom line is that I would receive referrals from them, and I hadn't even met them personally, but they knew here was a guy that was having some good results on some cases, discharged patients he couldn't help, whatever the case might be. And when patients came to them and asked them, by the way, I'd like to try a chiropractor, you know, they're going to ask that. I would imagine most of the medical doctors would say, I don't know how to help you, or I don't have any recommendations, or don't go there. They would then say, well, if you're going to go to somebody, go to this guy. Only because of the narrative report, because they got comfortable with feeling uncomfortable about what we're doing. Now, that's just was my reality. And as a result of doing this, not having any plan or thinking that would make a difference, I then started to see a lot of patients coming in just through the medical referral. And you know, I was in business to treat patients who referred other patients, and it was just interesting. So that's really all I wanted to share, with the fact that when I'm in active practice, I couldn't imagine not having the support of other physicians in the community of any type and skills, individuals like Richard, as well as my ability to produce reports so the medical community felt more comfortable with me and sent me patients. And this was a very cheap, it cost whatever it cost back then to mail a report. And that's how it happened. So I thought sharing that with you a little bit was maybe worthwhile, and I appreciated him asking and me having the opportunity to do it. And I'll leave it at that. If there's some questions or you want to ask more questions of Richard, that's really what I want to share with you guys. So any comments or questions about that?
Yeah, I mean, I'd just like to, comment on what Sig just said about the collaborative effort between, the chiropractic and the you know, there's enough forces working against us, you know, whether it's the state or federal or the insurance agencies, that coming together makes complete sense. One, most importantly, from a patient standpoint, in terms of ensuring optimal outcomes and multidisciplinary approach. But two, in terms of just, you know, coming together professionally so that we can support each other in, you know, in the continuing delivery of healthcare and, you know, the growth of our businesses.
Yeah.
Do you incorporate the reports of the other doctors within your own narrative as well?
That's a great question. On the more extensive ones, if I were reviewing records, let's say I had other, let's assume, if I understand you saying, let's say when I saw the patient, I saw the medical records. Absolutely. I would include that these are the doctors I saw, these are the records. What I might do in the history is give a brief summary. They went to here, they did this, and that's how they found themselves. But yeah, but more importantly, I just wanted to make sure every doctor they saw got a copy of my report, because it was my ability to promote me in a way that they understood. Does that help? I mean, does that make sense?
I'm an attorney,
Oh,
which I might be one of the over here, I'm not sure.
I didn't do it. I'm innocent.
But it helps us to get a report that's inclusive, basically try to incorporate everything together, which includes the MRIs and any other diagnostic tests that we perform, as well as if the other doctors can help us obtain the reports from, whether it be from the orthopedist or from the neurologist, if you're using those types of disciplines as well. Incorporate into one, make one package, which then helps us, you know, try to sell the case for, you know, the client.
It was just one thing, when I was doing a lot of med legal work in California, and I reviewed the records, they wanted me not to comment on what my impressions of those records were, because then it started to lead to my misinterpretation, or that's not what really happened, that sort of thing. But they did want to know that if I had the opportunity to review all the records, that I did, and it plays a role in my decision, at least to recommend certain treatments or avoid other treatments, that sort of thing. But yeah.
Basically, a doctor, orthopedist so-and-so found this, you know, idiosyncrasy attached report.
Absolutely, yeah.
Just a mention of that within yours.
That's a great idea, yeah. So, do you get a lot of reports from chiropractors, the way we're describing it? Good. You like them? They're good?
Pretty much so.
Yeah, you're saying that to be nice.
I think it's a work in progress. So.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So Mark, you're an attorney again.
Yes.
Yeah, and so that, you know, for you, you know, bringing together all of those kind of administrative elements, probably has been a bit of a nightmare, because, you know, trying to, you know, get all these reports together. And that, you know, having a coordinated multidisciplinary approach also lends towards, you know, having those things streamlined. So you haven't got this fragmentation of care, where you've got kind of like, you know, contradictory things happening.
And actually, the doctors can help us. I mean, chiropractors, I've had chiropractors offer, and they can get the records, they'll contact the hospital, look at the records for us, and no charge. Where they're looking for $100 and something from us, they're paying bottom of the, I guess, and they get them faster than we can.
Really? Yeah, not surprised.
It helps us out a lot.
Is there anything else that I can answer? Because this was an outstanding show, the presentation, so thank you for the opportunity.
I have one other question. Do you, in doing your mental calculus, whether you're operating or not, do you give any consideration if the believe pain is being neurogenic as opposed to vascular, or does it matter to you?
Well, you know, with you know, in taking the history, you know, I'll get a good idea if it's, you know, if there's a overriding vascular element to it. If that's the case, then what I've done in those instances, I've referred them out to vascular surgeons to get their opinion on that before, you know, I proceed any further.
I'm not just talking about that, I'm talking about directly related to the spine itself. For instance, the person has claudication of walking a certain distance,
Yeah.
and then that starts to, you know, down and down as far as I can walk a mile and I can walk half a mile. Does that play a part of this?
Oh, are you saying so if the patient has an associated vascular
Yeah.
insufficiency? Is that your question?
No, it is. I'm talking actually in the let's say in the neural sheath, for instance, cerebrospinal fluid, something along those lines, being compromised, stenosis, for instance.
Right. Okay. Well, yeah. Well, no. I mean, if the claudication is coming about, you know, I'm trying to understand if it's coming about from primarily a vascular issue,
Mm-hmm.
then, you know, then
I'm not saying that.
No, you're not saying that. It's just, if it's just a neurogenic issue.
Yes.
Yeah, so if it's just a neurogenic issue, then, and if the neurogenic issue is radiologically associated with, stenosis, then I'll decompress it.
And would there be any vascular problems with a stenosis?
No, no.
I have a question for Sig, how is the situation right now on the front with Adobe, this new proposal? I know that A&JC is involved, right, in the process.
With Adobe, with PIP?
With the new changes towards HMO,
Well, if you're specific to PIP right now?
Yeah.
You're asking? With the HMOs and PPOs?
Yeah, but they're trying, I think so they show right now for NJJ, right? There was the group of lawyers, they went and they saw the documents, was leaving the town.
Oh, that's something I wouldn't comment here on, but just what, I mean, for the purpose of this, because it's really not this is not the topic, but, some of you are with the new regs with HMOs and PPOs. Clearly, the HMO concept is being pushed to the side, but what's developing on the PPO side is probably gonna be a nightmare, and so that's gonna get a lot of pushback right now, because there's a lot of gaming going on, and, it changes day to day, so you may have more ideas of that, but we're pretty much on top of that. What I can